and welcome back. Our next session explores how to get your e-commerce logistics right. And it's my pleasure to welcome Dave Ching, who is the head of Australia for Geekplus, who will be moderating this session. Please do send in your questions for the panelists into the live discussion section just to the right of this video or underneath the video if you're using the mobile app. Dave, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Yara. So I would like to invite our co-panelists to turn on their camera as well. Yeah, welcome all. So welcome everyone for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to be here today as a moderator to discuss the topic of getting your e-commerce logistics right with Jess, Richard, and Andrew. So my name is Dave, and I'm the head of sales of Geekplus. And if you don't know about Geekplus, we actually provide the robotic solution to supply chain player with autonomous robot, which is AMR, like a goods-to-person solution to automate the warehouse operation. So we will use robot to move the rack to a rest station for the operator to pick your item from the rack to a customer carton box. So we aim to streamline and optimize the online fulfillment operation for e-commerce and retailers. So over the past few years, we have helped more than 10 businesses in Australia to transform their warehouse operation from manual to operation. So as we all know, the pandemic has changed the consumer behavior, and a lot of people are buying everything through the e-commerce platform, and they expect an extremely short delivery lead time from traditionally a week to a day. So it is important for the e-retailer or the e-commerce leader to maintain a strong fulfillment capability in order to obtain high level of customer satisfaction, such as next day or even same day delivery, which to ensure your competitiveness in this ever-changing environment. So it's a good time to hear some of our industry leaders about what they've thought. So before we start our discussion, I would like to let our co-panelists to introduce themselves. Hey, Jess, would you like to start first?
Yeah, good afternoon and thanks guys. I'm really excited to be here. So I look after Joel in Australia. We also get to look after Southeast Asia, and we basically bring swimwear to women so that they feel beautiful and confident in their bodies while they are being active. So we're not so much a fashion swimwear company, we're more kind of an active swimwear company. So we spend a lot of time with swimmers and water polo players, and we used to pre-COVID attend a lot of events. So obviously with COVID hitting and events shutting down, COVID had a huge impact on the way we kind of ran our business, and a huge part of it had to be focused to online, whereas we were 50-50 of online and in physical shows. So yeah, so we've had to do a lot of logistic changing, and we've learned a lot over the last year in that kind of platform area.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Jess. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Andrew Carroll. I head up a business called Omni. Before I go into that, I think we're going to talk about COVID a lot today and the impact on logistics, and it's a very human pandemic. So a shout out to those who are under restrictions at the moment, because you know, it's tough on the human side of things. Omni Growth is essentially been set up to help e-commerce retailers with their fulfillment, and we're an independent resource. So there's sort of two parts of the business. One is that we help retailers who are looking for a 3PL. So we effectively advocate on their behalf to design and source a 3PL. And then on the other hand, if they're looking to use their own warehouse, we do design and sourcing of solutions. So rather than focusing on one particular 3PL or one particular piece of software, we start with the retailer's needs and then design a solution around that, and then source it for the retailer. So essentially we make the complex process of finding a fulfillment solution easy for retailers.
Yeah, thanks Andrew. So Richard? Yeah, would you like to
I'm Richard Kelsey, co-founder and director of Beer Cartel. We started back in 2009, and our business is essentially like the Dan Murphy's for craft beer. So we've got 1,000 different beers from Australia and overseas, and we're created to kind of show everyone that the amazing craft beers that are out there. We have our own warehouse, and we ship directly from our own warehouse, and we also do things with 3PLs from time to time. So we've got a bit of experience there across those two sides of things. And yeah, went through the craziness of COVID last year and the massive increase in sales as a result of that. So looking forward to talk about that today.
Yeah, so we are happy that we have Jess from the fashion and apparel industry, Richard from the food and beverage industry, and we have Andrew. We can share some real from the consultant perspective. So all right, let's start off. So the first question I would like to start with Richard is what are your unique logistic challenges facing that the e-commerce customer is facing in Australia?
Sure. So I think when we think about Australia, it's a very big country. So we're the 6th biggest country in the world by landmass. And when you think about it, makes complete sense. So to go from Sydney to WA to Tasmania to Northern Territory takes around 5+ business days. So there's a long time to get across the country. So that's one of the big challenges. And with that, there's obviously a higher cost of delivery because of that sort of time it takes to get across the country. If you then add in the fact that the majority of the population's on the eastern seaboard, it means that there's much fewer sort of deliveries that are being made across to the rest of the country. So that has challenges there. We're also quite a small nation by population. So while we're the 6th biggest, we're actually by population density, I think we're 230th in the world. So there's very few people living in a massive country. And I think that very much adds up to this higher cost of delivery that we face in this country. If you then think about Australia as a nation, we're a island country that's quite isolated from the rest of the world. So it means to get goods in or to send them out, there's longer lead times and a higher cost there as well. So it kind of works as a bit of a double-edged sword. So if you don't have a business that's already operating in Australia, the cost of entry of coming into the country is higher. But it also means it's harder for businesses that are looking to export beyond the Australian borders as well. So there's some real challenges there from a sort of delivery time and cost point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. I think other than the operating cost is sometimes if you want to hire some operator at a market price in the industry, you find it very hard to hire the people to work in the warehouse, especially during the peak season, right? Yeah. Yeah. So Andrew, maybe can you share some idea on what's the unique challenge in the logistics for e-commerce players?
Yeah, absolutely. And Richard touched on a few. I think, with the issue with shipping, it's amazing when you've got European retailers who are trying to enter the Australian market and they just get so shocked with the freight costs in Australia. I think some of the other things are around stock shortages. And so, recently, it's not necessarily e-com, but, the capacitor shortage in the automotive industry, I think it was around before COVID, but COVID just exacerbated it. And so you've got a situation where you've got a $1 part that's stopping the production of a $30,000 car. India is just going through turmoil with COVID at the moment, and they're a major pharmaceutical provider. And so, what's the long-term impact of that? Speaking to someone the other day, they were saying now's the time to buy a TV just because, the cost of electronics are just going to skyrocket. So access to inventory, even components for inventory, is a problem for e-commerce retailers. The other one is inventory control. You would have seen recently that Kogan got into a bit of trouble. They've got great top line sales, but the demand as a result of COVID just fluctuates so much that it's so easy to be caught out with too much inventory, and that obviously leads to higher warehousing costs. Shipping costs is obviously a big one as well, and that's both international and domestic. So internationally, there's fewer flights that are coming in, and so that has an impact on air freight costs, and it's really hard to predict that. And then domestically, you've got carriers who are actually becoming a little bit more smarter around carrier costs. And so for those who've got bulky goods, you've probably seen recently a lot of carriers are starting to add surcharges around length and weight and things like that. And so, that hits e-commerce retailers hard. And then finally, it's around shopper expectations. I think when shopper expectations aren't really driving too much at the moment, but I think there's a tipping point where, there's a lot of retailers who will have to do catch up in order to meet shopper expectations. And so that's going to put a lot of pressure on an e-commerce retailer's logistics operations.
Yeah, I completely agree with you guys. Australia is a very huge country that we have to, our key challenges is how we can deliver the goods across different districts. So, Jess, I have a question that should you be building your own internal logistic capabilities, or is it easier for you to just find a partner like a 3PL logistic company for your logistic operations?
Well, when we originally started, we outsourced to 3PL, and it wasn't working for us. For me, customer service is the be all and end all of any business. So I really saw the value in having all of our inventory in a location that was accessible by all of our team members. So I'm based on the Gold Coast, and there's not really a lot of 3PLs on the Gold Coast just because it's not a big city. We were originally down in Sydney, and it was taking the 3PL team too long to get our orders out the door. If there was an error with dispatch, just the timing that the customer would have to wait for that was just far too long. And so we kind of looked at what we could do in-house, and we ended up getting a warehouse on the Gold Coast, and we actually do all of our dispatch and we keep all of our stock on hand on the Gold Coast. So at any given time we can, directly access it. And for me, it was really crucial that the customer can get the product promptly. They don't have to worry about waiting for any issues. 3PLs, they generally have quite a few companies that they're kind of looking after and stocking. So we weren't necessarily their main focus or, the most important company of theirs. So we kind of found that we were the lowest hanging fruit for them. And I know things have probably changed over the last kind of 10 years, but we just love keeping it in-house and find it a lot easier to have everything here and a bit cheaper as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So by having a warehouse with you under your control, etc., you can have more transparency operation in your warehouse. So
yeah. And also just touching on what I can't remember who said it earlier, but with inventory levels being so crucial at the moment, with stock coming in, we can count it and get it on the shelves and get it online, that afternoon, rather than having to wait for the staff members of the 3PL to kind of count it and fit it in with their schedule. So it just means that we've got, much tighter and quicker turnarounds to help service our customer.
Yeah, absolutely. So Andrew, what would you suggest to the audience?
Yeah, actually, it's I have these conversations daily with retailers, and the answer is it really depends. Jess has raised some good points, and unfortunately, all 3PLs aren't created equally, there's issues where some retailers have chosen the wrong 3PL and had a bad experience, and that's not good for anyone. I think probably it's good to understand why would you look at a 3PL in the first place. And so some of the reasons you look at going to a 3PL is around cost savings. And so, Geekplus deal with a lot of the larger 3PLs, and so they're moving more and more to automation. And so with automation, you can drive costs down. I think the other big thing, the largest cost is around freight. And when you move to a 3PL, you can take advantage of their bulk volume freight rates. And especially, depending on your product, if you can get access to dead weight rates through your 3PL, which means instead of paying for the cubic size of your product, you're only paying for how much it weighs. That can be a real benefit for retailers who have that high cubic weight product, but low dead weight. The other thing is expertise. It's really hard to develop operational expertise and to find the right people to run a warehouse effectively. And so by moving to a 3PL, you're immediately gaining that expertise, and you don't have to go through a recruitment process. Another reason is around ease of getting into markets. So, Jess raised the point that she's on the Gold Coast. If Jess had a huge market in Perth, well, actually, you can easily open up a warehouse in Perth and then service that WA customer faster, so you get the speed to market and also at a cheaper cost. But that doesn't make sense to do, for instance, if Jess's customer isn't interested in speed to market. And so that's where it comes down to, it does really depend. Likewise with overseas, there's a lot of retailers who are international who are wanting to come into Australia, and rather than setting up a warehouse, they can actually use a 3PL as a first step. Another one is better systems. So, depending on whether you've got run a warehouse management system or not, generally a 3PL will provide you better inventory data and an understanding of what product you've got, what orders are underway. The other one is around, if you pick the right 3PL, it should reduce your administration. Pick the wrong one and it increases your administration. And so it's really crucial that when you go through the selection process that you are really quite rigorous, because it's a big decision. You're putting your brand in the hands of someone else. And if they get it wrong, there's not only a financial cost from a poor sales experience, but also from having to transfer your stock somewhere else. But there's a huge brand detriment, and that's crucial. I think the kind of on the flip side, the reasons you wouldn't look at a 3PL, one of them is exactly what Jess mentioned. You lose a bit of control, and how much you control you lose really depends on the 3PL you choose. So the larger 3PLs, the reason they're quite strict is because they want to operate efficiently, and so they try and get anything that's slightly outside the norm, they don't include it in their warehouse because it's going to slow things down. So I wouldn't call them a sausage factory, but they're designed to operate absolutely efficient, at 100% efficiency. So if you've got something that's a little bit left field, like you want to write cards, handwrite cards and things like that, it's a little bit harder with a high volume 3PL. On the other hand, there's some smaller 3PLs that are just as reliable who can provide that flexibility. And so it really does depend on your business and whether you can find that right match. I guess one other downside, and this probably is, Jess, it'd be interesting to see whether you encountered this, but you have to fit their process often. And it's generally not too bad with the enterprise customers, but for say an eBay seller or a marketplace seller, if you're currently, your product isn't barcoded, or if you're selling stuff and shipping it as a letter when it shouldn't meet Australia Post's letter guidelines, then when you move to a 3PL, they can't afford to break the rules because they'll lose their rates with the carriers. And so therefore they have to play by the rules, which means that you can't cut corners. And so often retailers who have been cutting corners and then want to move to a 3PL find that they get caught out on the cost side of things. And probably the last point is, and this is a pro and a con, is you actually, there's a bit of bill shock when you move to a 3PL, because when you run your own warehouse, there's a lot of things that go on that you don't really understand the cost of. If 10% of your inventory doesn't move and it's just being stored in the back somewhere, there is actually a cost to that, but you don't see it in a very explicit way. Whereas when that 10% is stored in a 3PL, you'll see it as a per pallet per week rate on your invoice each time. And so that can be a pro and a con, because a lot of businesses use moving to a 3PL to become more efficient, because they start kind of reimagining their business to be more efficient. But at the same time, if you don't do that, you can end up with a really high invoice because the 3PL will highlight where there's waste in your business.
I think I've definitely seen that. So we've used a 3PL for one-off sort of projects that we've done. So with our core business being 1,000 different beers, and we get 20 to 30 each week, but we've always kept that in-house just because that the challenges of trying to put that into a 3PL, it would be very, very complex. But where we've found a use for a 3PL is where we've got so we've got a monthly beer subscription, and so it's essentially starts off with a pick and pack, so that they're assembling different packs of beer, subscription beers, so a 6-pack or a 12-pack, and then sending it out. And that I think is definitely where you can use a 3PL. We do a beer advent calendar at the end of the year, and I think that equates to 50 pallets of beer, and it's just well beyond our warehouse itself being able to do that. So that's very much where we go to a 3PL for that. But everything else we just keep in-house.
Yeah. And also it depends a little bit about your growth rate as well. You know, it does cost a lot to set up a warehouse and then move to another warehouse. So if you're actually constantly growing and you've got a high growth rate, you're probably better off moving to a 3PL and expanding within that 3PL rather than finding a warehouse either that's way too big for you right now and growing into it, or moving into a warehouse that you find you have to move out of, you know, in 12 months' time. So it really does depend on the business. There's no kind of hard and fast answer.
There's no right and wrong. And yeah, so
correct.
many of the things you said, Andrew, I'm like, yep, that was us. That was us. You know, like, I love handwriting and I still do it, which I regret most of the time, but I handwrite Christmas cards every single year to all of our customers. And, you know, like we have something like 5,000 SKUs. So to have that in a 3PL, it was just like, holy wow, the cost of that was through the roof. And it was just, we just couldn't, it was way too expensive for when we were smaller. And I think now that we've grown and our business has changed a lot, it could work for us now, but we've put so many systems and so much hard work in place that we just keep going with it.
And it's actually a cyclical thing. You know, a lot of retailers, when they start out, will go, actually, I want to focus my efforts on sales and marketing, and I want to be, you know, develop a competitive advantage in sales and marketing. So I'm going to outsource to a 3PL in the early stages. But once I've got that sales and marketing under control, then actually I want to start owning the supply chain side of things. And so then I might bring it in-house. And by that stage, the business growth is a little bit more stable. And so I know what sort of warehouse capacity I need and things like that. So, you know, it is something that even within one business, it'll actually vary over the life of that business as to whether a 3PL is the right move or not.
Yeah, it really depends on the business operation and how business can fulfill customer satisfaction. So, but when it comes to like, for example, we select a logistic partner. So what criteria that we have to consider that we can choose the right logistic partner? So do they have to include like some innovation solution or the full transparency of the whole warehouse operation? So anyone want to share your view?
I'll start it off. For me, it's about communication. I get a lot of people who are with a 3PL coming to me, and I would say 95% of the time, it's not because they want a cheaper 3PL. It's because either the 3PL isn't reliable or they're not communicating to them. And generally, you know, it's a bit of a broad statement, but 3PLs will generally pull back on account management when, you know, they need to look at costs. And to me, account management and that communication with the client is just so vital. So, you know, the issues that Jess raised, you know, where orders not going out on time and things like that, the last thing you want to do is hear from your customer that they haven't received an order. And so you need to find a 3PL who will communicate with you as well as your own warehouse would communicate with you, so that you don't find out from the customer that there's been an issue. You actually find out proactively, and then you can go proactively to the customer and say, look, sorry about this. Because the reality is there will always be issues, whether it's 3PL driven. You know, your own warehouse has issues. A 3PL will have some issues. Your manufacturer who sends you product will have issues. They happen. And so it's how you respond to those issues and how your 3PL partner responds to those issues that is actually the most important, I guess, sign of a good 3PL.
Yeah, I think I'd very much second that. So having gone through up to our sort of third 3PL that we're using now, it's very much on that getting that communication, and then when there are issues, getting them to be able to help work out a solution so that you don't have the same issues repeating over and over and over. When there's something that's found out, it's addressing that and then fixing it. And that's one of the challenges that we face. And part of the reason why we've changed 3PLs over time is there hasn't always been that sort of focus on, okay, this has been the issue. Now, what are the steps that we're taking to address it? So yeah, the more communication and solution finding that can be done, the better.
Yeah. And it's that rapport. We often find that there'll be, when we go through the process, there might be 2, 3PLs that are there or thereabouts from a commercial perspective and from a service level agreement perspective. And so I encourage my clients to go and actually meet with them and see the warehouse, because it's that, can you build that rapport? And it's not the rapport with the salesperson, because they're not going to be there when the proverbial hits the fan. It's actually rapport with the person who's in the warehouse, who's going to be touching your product. That's really, really important.
Yeah, other than the 3PL services, as a brand owner like Jess, so how can we manage customer expectations? So is it always about speed, or do price and service come into the consideration too? So can you share some perspective from a brand owner perspective? Yeah.
So with us, we deal, most of our customers are kind of anywhere between 13 and 25, and we find that generation is all about instant gratification. So they like to make the purchase and they like to receive the product, basically if they could in 5 minutes, without having to get off the couch. And so we try to find somewhere in the middle, because at the same time they don't like paying for postage. If they go to the checkout and see that the postage is $10, we see a lot of abandoned carts through that. So we're kind of playing around with the price point of going, well, if we can get the item to you in 2 days, are you happy to pay $12, or would you rather wait an extra 2 days and save $5? And I think, at the end of the day, every customer is slightly different. And if you can offer as many different options as possible, then you're going to keep as many customers as you can happy. But, it is expensive in Australia to send items, no matter, like our items are only 100 grams. And, as Andrew said earlier, if you can find a system that only charge you based on weight, you're going to save a lot of money. And we have done a few dodgy things with Australia Post and sent them as letters. So we were able to send things for letters for $4. We don't get away with that anymore. But yeah, I think certainly if you're just honest and upfront with the customer, we always try to under promise and over deliver. So we always send all of our items express, regardless of whether they pay for express or not, because we've just found if the sooner we get the product to the customer, the happier they're going to be.
Yeah, thank you, Jess. So Andrew, so from your perspective, so which one do you think is more important?
You talked about managing customer expectations,
Yes.
and I think the first step is really understanding customer expectations, because then and it once again, I know it's a common response, but it really just depends. So if you're a fashion retailer and you sell dresses, cocktail dresses, then there's a good chance you're going to have a customer segment who will want to buy on a Thursday and have it delivered on a Friday, so they can go out that Friday night. And so therefore, same day delivery becomes extremely important. Whereas, if you're selling something like underwear, it's not like people are likely to go, I need that absolutely tomorrow and I'm willing to pay a premium for it. And so they're going to be wanting to look at, a lower price for the freight. And so it really is understanding what are your customers' expectations. And as Jess said, providing that choice. And it's, there's a lot of things you can do around delivery. So, with companies like Sherpa and that these days, you could have late night shopping nights where you can shop till midnight and it's delivered the next day. And that's a great marketing tool. And it's simply using Sherpa same day delivery or any of the other providers for same day. And so when you start understanding what's important to your customer, you can then tailor the freight and your kind of freight promotions around those customer expectations. So yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity. I think, you know, the other thing for a retailer, there's a lot of opportunity around freight. So generally the cost between standard shipping and express shipping is less than the willingness of the consumer to pay for express shipping. So that gives you a really good opportunity to actually charge a premium on express shipping, and you make a margin to then subsidize your free shipping, your standard free shipping. If that makes sense. So it's really, there's an art to understanding what are my freight rates, what are my customer expectations, and how do I combine the two to provide a really kind of engaging solution for my customers.
It's interesting also just that customer expectations do change. So when we think about COVID last year, and there was a massive delay in parcels being sent around the country. So something that previously for us would take 2 to 3 days to go down to Melbourne was taking up to 2 weeks, just because of the backlog that different delivery partners were having. It was interesting just seeing that we actually had very few customers jumping up and down saying, "Where's my parcel?" And those that did, when you did let them know that it was all around the COVID and the challenges that the freight companies were having, that they were very understanding about that. So customer expectations, I don't think are just that's all it is, and it's exactly the same per company. I think it does evolve and evolves in the scene that we're in as well.
Actually, you touched on a good point, Richard, because it's about communication. We talked earlier about communication with your warehouse. It's actually communication with the customer around freight and managing that process. And there's so many tools out there, you know, through your platform or through something like a Starship It or ShipStation that allows you to send kind of branded notifications so that you can manage a customer's expectation if there's a delay in delivery and things like that. Because I think you're absolutely spot on. If a customer knows that thing when something's happening, they're more likely to be accepting. It's when they don't know that they end up calling you, and then that is a drain on your administration to try and follow up the carrier and things like that. And so, you know, I'd encourage a retailer and seller to make sure that they've got the most robust communication process from when the customer hits buy through to that final mile delivery.
Yeah, like a communication between client and the transparency in the full supply chain is actually important for us to manage the customer expectation. So delivering on time.
Just going to actually, sorry, Dave, I was just going to check. So Richard and Jess, are you finding that customer expectations around delivery are changing? Like, are they becoming more, I guess, more demanding around that, or you haven't seen a change recently?
For us, it's I think most people are actually pretty accepting, and that I don't think their expectations have evolved too much, but there are very much that you'll get the small portion of society that if there's something that goes wrong, they get very angry very quickly, and even but they'll send you an irate email, and within 10 seconds of sending that email, they've already left you a 1-star review before you've even had a chance to kind of address it. So yeah, I think there is a small portion of society where the expectations are almost going stratospheric, but for the vast majority, it's pretty consistent, and I don't think it's changed too much.
It's like shoot anything, first, you can ask questions later.
Exactly. And I think if anything, people are actually getting more things shipped to them more often now, and so they're seeing the whole gambit of things that take an absolute long time, and then things that are being delivered to them really quickly. So I think because of that, they're probably actually more understanding as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Richard. Like, majority of our customers are happy, and I think it's because, you know, we keep them informed every step of the way. It's like, we've got your order, it's been processed, it's been dispatched, it's on its way. Like, we just like to, you know, keep the communication channels open, and you know, as long as they're getting the emails and they haven't entered an incorrect email address, then they're up to date, they're happy. And it's, you know, as you said, the small portion of society, it's like, do you live in this world? Like, at what point do you think a swimsuit can get from Australia to New Zealand overnight when you only place the order at 5 p.m? Like, that doesn't exist. So I think, yeah, most of the people are fantastic, and the ones that aren't, I just pick up and speak to on the phone myself, and they quite often flip very quickly. It's like they're keyboard warriors, but the minute they realize that there's a person behind the screen, they're like, oh, sorry, like, we get it. And I think the hardest part is when, you know, a customer orders internationally and they use, you know, UPS Express or DHL Express, and they get it within 3 days, and they're like, well, why can't I get something from the Gold Coast to Sydney faster than what I can get something from Europe? And it's, you know, that's where it's like, well, our postal system just isn't as great because we don't have the numbers. And it's, I think it's hard that the general population don't necessarily understand that. So
yeah, I think there's also opportunities in that communication as well, with repeat purchase. So, you know, you're communicating to them around, you know, when their parcel's arriving. Great opportunity to also have branded columns at the bottom. You know, if you're a retailer, you might have supplier communication at the bottom, and so therefore you can get some supplier funding, or you might want to have, you know, new range launched being on the bottom of it, and the consumer will never mind because, you know, you're giving them value by telling them when their parcel's going to arrive. And so I think there's a lot of things around that communication piece that sort of are bigger than just that, just communicating that when their parcel's arriving.
Yeah, so delivering a correct order on time is a key point that everyone has to achieve, like with the customer expectation, like maybe 3 day or same day. So as Geekplus, actually many of our clients, they also concerning with the peak management, like Black Friday and Christmas time. So can you guys tell us about how you guys can manage this in your practice, and is it important for you to have the ability to scale up your e-commerce logistics? Yeah, maybe Richard, you can share some points.
Sure. So I think e-commerce logistics are kind of the standard thing that it's very important for scaling a business. So you essentially want, as your business grows, for the e-commerce or the logistics side of things, just to keep going in the background, and it's just one of those things that's a core part of the business. And that the idea is that if you can get it, that it just grows with you, and everything's systemized and standardized and automated, then it means that the focus can be driven onto your marketing side of the business, and that's the side that grows the business, and then it just means that your logistics side's just continuing to grow with it. So I think working with a 3PL, using different platforms to help automate your shipping and logistics side as much as possible is very key. And that's right from the shipping rates that you've got on the website through to the final destination, and even handling returns as well. So the more it can be automated, the more that you can just keep growing with your business.
Yeah, actually, Richard mentioned a very good point. For the e-commerce operation, it's just not about delivering; it's also about return. So I'm not sure if Andrew and Jess, do you have some idea, like how can we handle the return item with your operations?
Jess, do you want to touch on how you do it at the moment?
Yeah, so I wasn't sure if you were going to go ahead. We've got a process in place that we do it all in-house. So we just get all our returns go to a locked bag, so just our local post office, which get delivered every day when the postman comes to pick up our post. So basically every day we're getting returns, and we've got a team member that basically just sorts them and does the refund through Shopify and pops the stock back online. For us, it's really crucial because we only have we try to keep minimum inventory. We do have quick turnover, so we like to get everything back on the shelf, you know, basically that day if we can, you know, so that someone else can purchase it if it is an out of stock product. So it's, you know, it's just making sure that for us, we have the processes in place so that as for us, it's summer comes along, we can get, you know, more team members in and we can make sure everything is still functioning and the engine's still turning really smoothly. So it's, yeah, it's just making sure the processes are good for us.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Jess. I think it's really important, you know, you touched on peak. You almost have to just set up your operations to handle peak first, because, you know, I've come across a number of retailers that go, oh, we'll just bring in, you know, family and friends or staff members at peak time. But if you don't have the systems or processes in place, everyone turns up and they just stand around waiting for the operations lead, who's the only one who knows how the warehouse works, to actually direct them. And then it slows everything down. And so, you know, that's one of the upsides of a 3PL is they can, you know, expand, and they do a lot of planning around peak, so they can cater for your peak volumes. But if you're doing your own warehousing, you do need to make sure that you understand what your peak forecast is likely to be and how you're going to plan to meet that forecast. Because the last thing you want to do is have everything fall over in your peak sales period. I know I won't mention the name, but there's an apparel provider who they didn't have a great link between their inventory and their storefront. And so basically they were selling stock they didn't have. And for, you know, months afterwards, they're trying to handle customer complaints and rectify the issue. And so, you know, you really need to make sure that you've got a robust system for peak. I think around returns, it comes down to your product as well. Returning a product can be quite an expensive process, you know, from the freight, the return freight, plus, you know, if you're using a 3PL, the inbounding and QC checking and putting it back into stock. So it really depends on your product and how expensive it is, and, you know, how much margin it is, as whether you actually get it to come back into the warehouse, or do you just get the customer to take a photo of the damage or whatever it might be, if it's in a damage claim, and then just send them out a new item. So, you know, I've got a number of clients who just send out new items. It's different if it's kind of change of mind, but if it's damaged or not working, or sometimes it's easier just to send them a new product. So it does really depend. Yeah. What was that, Jess?
Sorry. No, I was about to say damaged goods. It's way too expensive by the time they pay for, well, you refund them the postage.
Absolutely,
you're paying a refund cost, you're paying the postage, and then you've got a faulty good that you can't actually do anything with, you know, for a garment. But yeah, so it's way cheaper, just get photos, send them out, and yeah, 100% agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
I think the talking about planning for peak, Andrew, makes a lot of sense as well. So with COVID last year, our peak suddenly, normally the peak's at Christmas time, the peak goes throughout the whole year last year. And it meant that, so we had to change all our systems just to keep up with that sort of demand during the year. But when we got to Christmas time, it felt like a quiet time for us. So it was a sudden change, and it's amazing that the more that you do plan for that peak, that the more that it does really help you and ensure like really fast running throughout the lower times as well.
Yeah, perfect. And what I'd imagine, Richard, with returns, you know, with glass and things like that, you know, obviously that can't come back through the network. So for that sort of thing, you just do a resending a product out.
We can get returns, but we don't really have any customers that tend to return stock. So the only return stock that we tend to get is just a damaged parcel that's delivered back to us. But yeah, for any damages that a customer gets, we're just the same as Jess. So get a photo and then we'll send them out a replacement.
Yeah. Sorry, just on the returns, there are some really great tools around that. I don't, Jess, Richard, you're using like a returns portal, like a branded returns portal, where a customer can print off a label themselves and things like that.
Yeah, we use the returns portal through Australia Post, which so many customers use, and it gives them a much cheaper rate, which is fantastic. It means they don't have to go into the post office, which is often quite a pain. They can just drop it at their nearest little post box. So we've had some really great feedback from switching over to using the portal. The only downside is our international customers can't use it yet. So hopefully that's in the works. I think we got told a couple of weeks ago. So yeah.
But for those who aren't familiar, it's a really handy tool because you can have it branded, you know, aligned with your brand, and also the customer can print out a label as often as they like, and you don't get charged until they actually send it, and then it can't be reused again. So there's some smarts around it. And Richard, what about yourself? Are you?
Yeah, I mean, with so few returns, we don't have anything that we've got completely structured at the moment, or that I'm 100% aware of. Yeah, I think we'd have a return from a customer probably less than a fortnightly type thing. So it's very low. It's mainly just dealing with damages.
Yeah, I feel sorry for shoe retailers because I think they've got really high returns because people buy, you know, two sizes, well, half size and the full size up, and then return one. So you know, that becomes
we're the same. I actually encourage people to be honest, like if they're a first-time customer, because swimwear is so niche, and especially athletic swimwear, like you want it to fit tight, and people, you know, are taking a gamble on how this one piece is going to fit. So I say, if you're unsure of sizes, please buy both of them and return one. We offer free shipping for orders over $150, so they get free shipping one way to counteract that. And
yeah,
I mean, it means that our return rate is much higher than, say, beer. But you know, at the end of the day, for me, it's how can we make the customer as happy as possible and give them that in-home shopping experience without actually having to leave the house.
Yeah, we have talked about the like customer expectation, how we select the correct partner for our logistic operation. So as we can see, there is a lot of different alternative delivery option like click and collect or the locker delivery. So do you guys think that will be a trend for us in the future? So Richard, do you have some idea on these topics?
Yeah, I guess so. If you think about online and why people buy online, it's all around convenience. So online, they can buy anytime, anywhere. And I think as part of that sort of convenience side of thing, that's where click and collect and parcel locker really play into it. So for us, we have a store in Sydney, and we closed our store for 4 months of the year last year, just as lockdown came into play, and that was just a voluntary move that we did. And all of a sudden, so while the store was closed, our online growth went through the roof. But at the same time, that the click and collect, we still allowed people to pick up from the warehouse, and that went through the roof as well. And it was basically a sort of convenience factor. So people could get it delivered to their own home, but they were choosing to click and collect, and in part that's a savings as well. But yeah, when you think about online and the sort of convenience factor, well, then both click and collect and parcel lockers play into that, because you can't necessarily always get something delivered to your home, whether it be for security reasons, whether it be that you're unable to get that parcel delivered there for some kind of reason. So yeah, it's very much I think something that's here to stay and will only grow more. And when I look at like our local post office, that they've just put in a parcel locker service, and I think it's going to continue to grow throughout the country. And it's just providing other ways for people to get those parcels at a time that's convenient to them.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that one, Richard. Like I think there's nothing more frustrating from a customer's point of view that, you know, you see an order, say like I purchased something from Nobby's, which is a 2-minute drive down the road, and I watch the package go to Brisbane, come back to my area 3 days later, and it's like, well, if I could have just driven by and done a click and collect, it's a much quicker option. I get the product when it suits me. I don't have to go to the post office during office hours to get the package. And I think it's just giving that customer service another level, or giving the customer the option to, you know, get it around them and when it suits them. And I think a lot more people are wanting that option, and they're a bit disappointed if a company doesn't offer it. So you're missing out on customers if you haven't got it.
Yeah, and I think it's a win-win. It's a win for the customer. It's a win for the retailer because they don't have to pay for postage. So if you know, on a profitability for a basket perspective, you know, it's a much more attractive offer. You know, and Coles, I noticed recently have gone to a 90-minute click and collect. So it's all about this convenience. I think, you know, you talked about the future, and I think, you know, Doddle UK company just signed with Australia Post last year and about expanding the whole parcel collect from different locations. And I think that's going to be a really interesting proposition because if you've got a bit of real estate in an important area and you've got space to store parcels, why wouldn't you become a parcel pickup location? Because it's going to drive people into your store. And so I can see actually that there'll be a bit of an explosion of places where you can actually pick up, you know, direct your parcel to and pick it up from, because it seems to make sense for everyone.
It also, like as you were just saying, it brings people into the store. The amount of times we'll have a click and collect customer come in and they'll end up buying another one piece, or they'll buy an accessory. So it's, you're getting an upsell without actually having to do any extra work. It's them coming to collect something, they'll try it on, you know, if it fits, they keep it. If it doesn't, they can exchange it, but they also end up buying more and you haven't really had to do too much work. So it's, yeah, it's definitely a win-win situation.
We are having a very conversation here, but we do have some questions from our audience that around the click and collect. So one of the questions from our audience is, do we need to have a physical presence to offer click and collect, or we can partner with some provider, for example, post office, to offer the click and collect solution? So you want to answer this question first? Andrew,
I think you touched on
yeah,
the Australia Post.
You don't have to have a physical presence. You know, there's a number of, you know, I think 7-Elevens have you know, a parcel pickup type solution, and you know, I think at one stage one of the department stores was looking at being able to pick up your parcels from a department store. So there'll be more and more of these locations that you'll be able to pick your parcels up. And I think, you know, if you go on some of the marketplaces, I think eBay, if you go on eBay, you can actually choose click and collect, and it'll give you a range of locations in your sort of area. And so, no, absolutely, you don't need a physical store.
I think so. Curious Please, I think they have different 7-Elevens in different locations, news agents that you can pick things up from as well. One interesting thing we found was that at times you can have different places that have different limits on the actual size of the parcel. So selling beer can be quite heavy and a decent sized parcel. And when we were using Curious Please as example, that we found that while there was a parcel point close to someone's house, that it actually got transferred to something that was further away just because of the actual size of the parcel. So that's just something to keep in mind if you have large, bulky goods.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know, it used to be the domain of Australia Post. PO boxes was sort of exclusive to Australia Post, but now, you know, they're opening up. You can pay a little bit extra, and you can have other couriers delivered to those locations. So the environment is constantly changing.
Yeah, actually, well, I didn't realize that it almost comes to an end of our panel discussion. So, but before we end our session, so I would like to ask our co-panelists to share some final tips of how do we have a very effective e-commerce operation. So maybe we can take a minute or two to share your final tips to our audience. Maybe we can start with Andrew.
Yeah. I think it's, I'm probably a little bit biased, but I actually think that it's really important to take a step back and really understand what your business's needs are, where you're heading into the future, and what the best solution is for where you're heading. And I think it's good to get advice from different areas. It might be retailers who have gone through the same process. So, you know, and Richard have shared some really important insights with us during the day, and I think, or during this session, and I think, you know, it's really important to kind of learn from what others have gone through, and to take some independent advice, because not everyone can be an expert on logistics. So, you know, there are a lot of options out there, and it does depend, as Jess said, there's no right or wrong. You really got to dig down and understand, what is your business, what are your products, who are your customers, where are they located? And once you've done that review, it's only really then that you can say, okay, well, I think this is the right solution for my business right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so, as Andrew sort of mentions, it's thinking about that sort of big picture, and then once you've kind of got that big picture and where you're going kind of worked out, then it's looking at things on a more sort of day-to-day, week-to-week level, on where are the bottlenecks, where are the problems, how can you overcome these different issues, so that you can make this more streamlined and continue that growth. So yeah, the more that you can look to the future and work on that sort of ways of how you're going to actually go about scaling up, the more that you can handle, one, the sort of peak periods, but also not just peak period in the next year, peak period in 5 years' time as well.
I think you guys have covered a fair bit, but for me, it's always looking to be better. You know, like, even though you made a decision on something 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 weeks ago, the world is constantly changing, and, you know, every business is constantly developing. So what might have worked 6 months ago, there might be a better solution now. So never take your foot off the pedal, and always think that you can be better, because there's always a better option out there. And, you know, if you stop looking, then you kind of just settle, and growth will slowly start to dwindle away. So just keep your eyes on the game, and, you know, always think that you can be better than what you are doing today.
All right, thank you everyone. So honestly, these are topics that we can talk all day, but unfortunately we are running out of time. So thank you so much all of you for your contribution to share your wisdom and your insight with us. So it's been fantastic with you guys. So Yarrow, back to you.
Thank you everyone for coming and sharing your insights. If the attendees have any more questions for our panelists, please do connect with them on the Swapcard platform. I would also like to thank Geekplus for sponsoring this session and for sponsoring Seamless Australia. Please do check out Geekplus's virtual booth by clicking on the exhibition hall tab, and do network with the other attendees and speakers using the attendees and speakers tabs. Once again, I would like to thank you. I would like to thank everyone for joining the session, and do enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.